seven genocide against people of the North. So there's an ethnic group called the Isaaq group. And another way that they describe it is the Hargeisa Holocaust, because hundreds of thousands of people were killed. All the cities were destroyed in Somaliland from the south to the north. And a lot of refugees started pouring out of the country. So that may be something you associate with the word Somalia is this internal conflict and civil war, but it was less of a civil war than the South and this dictator attacking the North. So as a result of all these people dying, in 1991, Somaliland declared their independence. So they're saying, of course, we don't want to be a part of you anymore because you killed all our people. We don't feel like you represent us. We want to be our own country. So they made their own flag. They declared their own country. But unfortunately, to this day, no one else in the world recognizes them as their own country. So even though this has been a thing now since 1991, so that's 30 years of independence, no one else in the world recognizes them. So it's a very unique political situation. And I felt very lucky to have the opportunity to be there, not just to understand the country and be welcomed by the people, but also to understand the difficult political situation that exists here. So just to give you some economic statistics, so 30% of their annual income comes from the livestock industry. So there are many, many goats, there's many, many camels, and that pretty much dictates the entire country. Off of that, 55% of people are nomadic or semi-nomadic. So that's more than half the country still doesn't really live in a home. They take the livestock and they migrate depending on the seasons, depending on whether they want to be on the coast. And yeah, that's the most common industry. It's the fourth lowest GDP in the world. It's something like $400 per person per year. So that's not a lot of money, as we all know. And the country basically is at a standstill because they're trying to figure out how we're not recognized by anyone. The rest of the world thinks it's too dangerous to invest here because they associate it with pirates and civil war, and they think we're part of Somalia, so we don't get investment. We don't do business with international people. So how can we really change our country around? How we want to be an independent country, we want to be recognized by the rest of the world, but we're not there. We don't have the resources to do that quite yet. So how can we go about doing that? This is a photo, actually. I thought it would be interesting to you because a lot of you are also Muslim, but I talked about the livestock. So actually the biggest form of income the country gets is during the Hajj. So it's close to Saudi Arabia. So they have all of these boats filled with hundreds of thousands and millions of goats, and they send it across the Gulf of Aden to Saudi Arabia. So that is the biggest form of income for the country. And last year with COVID, it was a big problem because the Hajj wasn't happening. So they had all of these goats that are being ready to go over there. But then with COVID, the Hajj didn't happen and a lot of money did not pour into the country. So actually it created a big economic crisis for a lot of families and a lot of groups in Somaliland. So I told you just a little bit about the politics of the country and kind of the importance. They need a push sort of to get started. They need people to believe in them. They need investment. So in 2008, this school was created called the Abarso School. And the goal of the school was understanding that educational institutions in Somaliland currently are not great. So there's only one or two private schools. Most of the people go to public schools. That means 90 people in the classroom. Not a lot of academic attention. The universities in Somaliland aren't great. So the founder of the school, Jonathan Starr, is an American businessman whose aunt married a Somali man. And he was telling the family all about what Somaliland is like and how it's this really hopeful young nation. They have dreams of recognition and making an impact on the world, but they don't have the resources. So this American man, he founded this school called the Abarso School. So as you can see, it is in the middle of the desert. So you can look around, there is not another thing you can see in this photo. So this is where I moved for the last year. Yes, into the middle of the desert. So that was a very interesting experience, and lived on this compound. So you can see that the walls are very high. Although terrorism in Somaliland is not as big in Somalia, there are some groups like Al-Shabaab that still operate in the northern part of the country. And as you know, a lot of the things about some of these fundamentalist extremist groups is they really reject Western education and all things. Women aren't supposed to be in school, women aren't supposed to be learning. So they really took issue with our school. So we were kind of under constant threat of Al-Shabaab at all times, which is why we had these really tall walls. You can't really see here, but in the corner, this is the teacher's compound. So it's a compound within a compound. And always on property, we had 10 armed soldiers with their AK-47s ready to defend us at any time. So this is within this school. We had teachers from all around the world. So from the US, because it's an American school, so we had a lot of teachers from the US, Poland, Ethiopia, Singapore, consisting of 32 teachers and 350 students. So all of us lived, because it's a residential school, we all lived on that little compound that I showed you. Here's a photo from the compound, the teacher's compound, so you can see how high the walls are. This is the roof. So this is my favorite place every day to go up and kind of see the desert. So you can see there's nothing there but hills and shrubs, and in the distance there's mountains. So every day we could go walking into the desert and we'd find hyenas and cobras and all sorts of animals in the desert. These are all the faculty that we had at this school. So we do, within the compound, we really do not want to be attacked or criticized by Al-Shabaab or any other religious figures or any religious figures in the community. So we have to be very strict about how we operate. So similar to many of you, I wore a hijab every day to go to school and to teach. So my students, of course, would never see my hair, but also in the classroom, we separated by gender. So men and women were not allowed to sit next to each other. They were not allowed to look at each other, our female and male students. They were not allowed to interact after class or outside of class. So it was an interesting experience for many of us, especially Americans, to really abide by these Islamic Sharia principles, which I do not abide by in my own life in the United States. So it was a big education experience for me, and my students were very eager to show me how to put on the hijab and make sure that I was learning correctly. So these are some photos of the students. So this is the uniform that they wear to class, and this is outside of class. So you can see that even if we're in the middle of the desert, the students all had to be wearing masks. And this is a traditional game that they played with rocks. So these are some of my 9th graders, and this is what we would do for fun. We'd go out into the desert, go for walks or play games, and everyone, really bright, energetic students. So this is me and some of my female students. So these are 7th graders. We went for a walk, we'd come back. So trying to enrich their lives outside of the classroom, because they're in intensive classes all day. All of the classes are in English. They also take math and leadership and computer science. So they have really rigorous academics. But because we're serving essentially as their parents, I said there are only 32 teachers, and within the 32 teachers, we have to do everything. We teach all the classes, we coach all the sports, we do the communications and the finance and the admissions, the universities. So our job is to enrich these students' lives kind of wholeheartedly. So in terms of, making them well-rounded students. So part of that would be going on walks and going on hikes and observing nature and all sorts of different things. As well, one of the unique things about the school, especially for women, is the ability to try new things that they otherwise would not. A lot of our students are nomadic, as I said previously, or they are from very large households. So in Somaliland, it's not uncommon it's pretty typical for a man to take multiple wives. and have many, many children. So sometimes some of my students would have 40 siblings. So it's an opportunity for girls to get out of the house where they're doing a lot of cooking and cleaning and be able to have an education. So one of the things with that is girls would learn how to play sports for the first time. And it's the only women's sports team in the entire country of Somaliland was at our high school. So community service is a big part of the student life as well. So we would go, this is a photo from a local orphanage and all these local orphans. And we'd bring our students there to teach them English, to teach them math, so they could give back to their country. Because the goal of the school, it's a very competitive school to get into. We like to say it's more competitive than Harvard, because nearly every single student of age in the entire country applies to go to our school, and we can only accept 50 per grade, or like 60. So we have a lot of applicants. They start in 7th grade and then they go all the way up to 12th grade. So we want to make sure that the education is not just limited and confined in our school, but it's able to spread throughout the entire country, because the goal of the school is to raise the future leaders of the country. As I mentioned at the beginning, there's not a lot of opportunity for people in Somaliland. So we're hoping to give them the tools. One of our focuses is going outside for university. So we get them full scholarships to go to school. Actually, I have some students who are in Indonesia now, actually, and they're going to BINUS University in Jakarta. So we send them all over the world, wherever they can get full scholarships. So they pursue different educational experiences, and then eventually when they graduate and get their master's degrees, then they'll return to Somaliland with tools and connections to be able to enact change. So the students were incredible. This is World Hijab Day that we celebrated, which is celebrated in all around the world, every country, because there's Muslims in every country, to celebrate wearing the hijab and make people aware of what it feels like to wear the hijab around the world. So this was an exciting thing to take part of. These are 2 of my 7th graders. So yes, the hope is, as I said, 12th grade, they graduate from a Barso school, and then they're able to go on to university. So this is a photo of the most recent graduating class. And so they're all around the world now, everywhere from Indonesia, like I said, to the US, to Morocco, to Lebanon, to Dubai. So the students go all around the world to school. This is one of my students. He worked with me on public service and communications. His name is Amin. So he was accepted to Northwestern University, which is one of the most incredible schools in the United States. Only 8%, actually, I think it's less now, only 6% of students that apply to Northwestern are accepted. So he was the first Somali to ever get accepted there. And I moved him in this fall. So actually I got to fly to Chicago and pick him up from the airport and move him into school, which was a really wonderful experience. And they have big dreams. So this is a quote from one of the students. She wants to come back to Somaliland and explore all the untouched mountain ranges. She wants to expand her views and perspective, gaining insight into what success looks like. When she comes back, she hopes to spot the areas that Somaliland is unsuccessful in and improve them. While living in Somaliland, noticing the holes might be hard, since these holes are all we know. But learning about new cultures and new ways of living will enable me to see the holes and maybe think of solutions. So a lot of our students want to be doctors and engineers and really give back to their country. So rebuild and re-educate the country after so much was lost in the civil wars. So that's a little bit about the school, just in terms of Somaliland in general. So we have all of these students, as I mentioned, but there's also other ways that we think that they might be able to get recognition. Something that actually a paper was published earlier this year was about tourism in Somaliland and how that could potentially be the ticket to recognition. So these are all photos that I took in my time around Somaliland. And so the thing, because very few outside people have ever been there, there's all of these amazing historical sites that have yet to be discovered. So this site was only discovered within the last 15 years. It's all something that the local people knew, but they didn't think anyone from the outside world would be curious. But they have some of the most incredibly well-preserved cave paintings that date back thousands and thousands of years. So this is one of the leading sites. They also, as I mentioned earlier, have a beautiful coastline with the most beautiful Indonesian standard beaches and sand and water, and there's desert tourism as well. So basically, this article that was published articulates how tourism could be a vehicle for independence, because if the outside world understands all of the different beauty in this country, that could be a means to say, okay, wow, this is a peaceful country that's preserving a lot of their cultures, that's preserving a lot of their interesting attributes as a destination. How can we be involved in saving these sites before Al-Shabaab destroys them? The other thing that's really interesting is relations with Taiwan and UAE. So that's giving a lot of people hope. Taiwan actually has diplomatic relations with Somaliland because Taiwan is in a similar situation, right, as part of China, but they view themselves as independent. So, and the rest of the world does not grant them independence. So Taiwan has actually developed a strategic relationship with Somaliland. They opened an embassy there. So this is a photo of two political leaders from Somaliland and Taiwan opening an office in Somaliland. So that's an interesting relationship because Taiwan is one of the most advanced places on earth, highly educated, really a wonderful, wonderful place. So they're hoping that this diplomatic relation will yield in positive results for the country. The other thing is, if you think back at the map at the beginning, Somaliland, they have a large coastline. And there's great possibility because a lot of countries in Africa are landlocked and they want access to a port. So the UAE actually is building a several billion-dollar port in Berbera on the coast of Somaliland. It's a DP World. So this hopefully will increase more avenues for trade for the country and help establish the country's reputation around the world as a safe place and a credible place to do business. So I know that I don't have much time, so that is all I will share with you guys today. But I'm hoping that you learned something about Somaliland because independence is something that all of my students, all of my coworkers were very, very passionate about. And the first step towards recognition is awareness. So it's making sure that people around the world know about this state and know that they really want independence and they're working hard to get it. So thank you so much for your time. I will stop my screen share. I know we don't have much time, so maybe one or two questions before you move on to your next speaker.
Wow, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much, Jenny. Okay, I think we're going to take maybe the first question from here in Pontianak. Okay, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Saigu. Hi, Jenny. Jenny, hi. You can call me Fanin, and I am from Islamic Institute of Pontianak. So it's such an honor to have you as a speaker like any other speaker. So like any other schools, we also have the education systems. So I would like to know, and I always wonder, from at what time that your school operate for the student, okay? From what time they had the class? Because this is the middle school, I think, right?
Yeah, so it's from 7th grade all the way up to 12th grade.
They have, and they have, most of them is Islam students.
100% Muslim students.
100%.
Yes.
So how do you classify the class time for the students? Thank you.
Like what time of you're asking what time of the day the classes were? Okay. Yeah. So when the students wake up, we have a mosque on campus. I live right next door to the mosque. So the students wake up for their early morning prayer, and we want to make sure that they don't just mess around, right? They're awake, so we need to get them into activities. So actually classes start at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was busy all day until 10 p.m. So these students are so busy, they work so hard, the teachers work so hard to make sure that every day is filled with learning opportunities for them. I hope that answered your question. Nice to meet you. Thank you for introducing yourself.
It was interesting. Next.
Okay, hello, Miss Jenny. My name is Aida. I come from IIEN Pontianak, and I can conclude what from you said before that the lifestyle or the country situation is still different and little bit underrated with our country right now. And I'm curious why such a thing can happen, and is there any main factors so the country doesn't develop well? Also, why another country won't recognize either help Somaliland? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and something I grew really passionate about while I was there, because they have these amazing elections that are very democratic. Like they have some of the most unique practices in the world. So before you vote, you actually have to scan your eye, because they want to make sure that there's no election fraud, that no one in the outside world can say, oh, you're a country that's not democratic, like there was cheating involved. So they have all of these incredible practices that are really trying to show the outside world that they are an independent country. So to your question of why other countries don't recognize them, it's such a good question, because they should. But people just don't learn about the place and just assume that it's like Somalia. And Somalia, still, there's not a strong government. There's terrorist attacks every day. So they think that it's one country. And the other issue is that the South, they haven't recognized the North. So Somalia does not recognize Somaliland. So the outside world, they have a difficult time like formally recognizing the two, because the South has not granted independence to the North yet. So they don't want to cause an international conflict. They don't want to cause another civil war. So like I said, it's been 30 years now. And your other question was about what factors contribute to the lack of success. And it really is that they have had to rebuild this entire nation in 30 years, because all of their cities were destroyed when the genocide happened. The cities were all burned down to the ground, and they really targeted intellectual people. They targeted doctors, they targeted lawyers and teachers. Those were the first people to be killed. So they've had a really difficult time because they essentially lost an entire generation, especially of young men. And it's not typical there for women to get education. So we've had to do a lot of work. A lot of people are suspicious of our school. A lot of people support our school, but a lot of people are suspicious as well. But our hope is that we are creating opportunities for, like you said, for more students to go abroad and to learn new things and be able to bring that back, because the quality of universities in Somaliland is not great. So that's the hope. And I'm glad that now you all know about this country as well.
Okay, Jenny, are you okay with one more question?
Yeah, one more question. I'm sorry that I ran a little bit over, but it's great to hear from you guys. So yes, I'd love another question.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Myself, my name is Syauki Fadil Setiawan. I'm from Syariah Banking Prodi. My question is, I pretty shocked that when I hear there is country called Somaliland. What I know is Somalia. My question is there really 100% the people in that country is Islam people? And the second is what is the cultural shock that you feel when you go in Somaliland? Okay.
Thank you. Those are really, really good questions. So your first question, is it really 100% Muslim or 100% Islamic? That is the number they say. But if people are not actually religious, it's very inappropriate to say so. So they would be shunned by the rest of the country and the people because the Islamic life is so strong. So it's hard to know for sure if 100% of the country is. But I like to think, well, not that I like to think, but I don't think it is. I don't think everyone, 100% of all people are religious, because many of my students would come to me and they'd want to know about, oh, I'm having struggles with my faith. I would love to learn more. So we had one of our faculty members, he was an imam. So he would teach Islamic classes, he would teach Arabic classes. So he did a lot of work because, of course, when you're seventh grade, you're in ninth grade, you have a lot of questions about the world and understanding your identity in relation to this world. So it was a topic of conversation with students and making sure they had access to learn about Islam and to make sure that they were making decisions that were informed. Your other question about the shock, it's different in every way than where I grew up in California. So being there, it was a very interesting shock, and there's very few non-foreigners there. So I was one of like 30 people living in this country that were not Somali. So going into town, people would be like, wow, what is a foreigner doing here? So drawing a lot of attention. But people were so curious to learn about where we came from and why we were in their country, because they were so eager to share their country with outsiders and hoping that we would be able to take their stories with us and the story of their country as well. So in terms of cultural shocks, of course, always the food. They eat a lot of rice and goat and beans. So I was missing Indonesian food and Malaysian food because I was used to this amazing food in Borneo. And that was a change for me, as well as I had to have very formal relationships with my male students because of the gender differences. So in the US, it's very normal. You give them high fives or you laugh with them. And it was difficult for me to get to know the male students because we had to always have this barrier between us. But I grew to enjoy the cultural differences as well. And even putting on the hijab every morning, I enjoyed doing, and I tried to be as respectful of the culture as possible, even though it was very unfamiliar for me. So I gained a lot of learning experiences living in a very Islamic way of life. There's like things in the whole country. There's no alcohol. There's obviously no haram products. So normally in every country, like there's some influence, right? Like if you're in, I know a lot of you are Muslim, so you don't drink bintang, but it's an option. But in Somaliland, there's no access to any haram products. So it was an interesting adjustment, but I really enjoyed living there, and I'm thankful that they allowed me the chance to engage deeply with their culture.
Well, I guess that concludes our session for today. Thank you so much, Jenny, for your wonderful presentation, and we are looking forward to your visit to West Borneo someday.
Thank you so much. I hope to return. Terima kasih. Shukran jazilan to all of you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Jenny. Applause, big applause for this session. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Pak Segu. Two Fulbrighters. This is what look like when two Fulbrighters meet, although not in persons. Yes. So yes, Jenny is also a Fulbrighter. Went to Sabah for teaching job actually, last year. So inshallah, maybe Jenny will come to Borneo again and to Pontianak, hopefully. Yes, Jenny. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Big applause again, and we should thank Jenny because Jenny was in a very tough time, but she is willing to be with us, to share her experience, very interesting experience, like cultural shocking. Yeah, it was a good questions, well, and your answers very, interesting, very inspiring, Okay, so we come to our ends of the session. Again, thank you so much, Jenny, and then thank you, Pak Segu, and thank you all, every student. So we will go to next session, but we will have a short break first. And then we will start again after 15 minutes. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Terima kasih. Aplaus yang kuat. Buaf 5. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Audio Jungle.